Welcome to a new episode of American Pulse. Today we have a very, very special episode about a wonderful person and a wonderful organization. It's called Tannenbaum. And today we're interviewing the CEO of Tannenbaum, Joyce Dubinsky.
Thank you.
Welcome to our show.
It's good to be here.
Thank you. It's good to have you in our show. I would like to start off talking about Tannenbaum and how did he join and what happened with Tannenbaum.
Oh, well, Tannenbaum was in existence for about 10 years before I got there. It was founded after a very famous rabbi passed away. He had been known as the human rights rabbi, and at the time of his death was named as one of the 100 most influential religious leaders in the U.S. And he worked for social justice, so that he was a voice for social justice, a voice for interreligious understanding, and he had worked with Martin Luther King on racial issues and the Biafran people to save their lives, and had done a range of things across the country and the world to save people and make sure that everyone was respected.
That's great. So what's your mission?
Well, Tannenbaum's mission is to put it simply, is to combat religious prejudice.
Yes.
And then the converse, to build a world, more peaceful world where people respect differences. But I think you have to understand combating religious prejudice as something that occurs on a continuum. And it includes everything from ignorance to disinformation, to bias and prejudice, to discrimination, to hate crimes, bullying, harassment, and ultimately to violence and even the wars that invoke religion as their cause.
I would like to know more about Joyce Dubinsky. If you can give us a brief history about your joining Tannenbaum and your background.
Okay. Well, I've always been interested in issues of social justice and in making sure that people, no matter what their identity and who they were treated with respect. And that started with Martin Luther King and issues of race relations in this country and the importance of treating people, no matter what their color, country of origin, or visible perception, equally. And it then, that my concept, and I think the concept of diversity and inclusion grew as I grew older, so that it really has embraced all different identities, including the one that we deal with at Tannenbaum, which is religion, which is the one that tends to be given lip service but rarely really addressed. And my journey was kind of checkered. I was a caseworker working for social justice. I became a lawyer, and I created a legal department in the largest local philanthropy in the U.S. I became the national director of marketing and communications for an organization that was very old in the U.S. called the National Conference of Christians and Jews. And during the time I was there, they changed their name to the National Conference for Community and Justice to make sure that the name reflected a commitment to all people. And then I came to Tannenbaum as first an executive director and now it's CEO.
Great story. I was wondering if you're being driven towards helping it to prevent discrimination and religious problems and differences. Have you ever experienced anything personally or no?
Oh yeah.
You did?
Yes.
Would you mind to share?
No, it's fine. Tannenbaum's full name is the Tannenbaum Center for Interreligious Understanding, and it's a secular and non-sectarian organization. I'm the CEO, and I happen to be Jewish. And when I was a kid, I lived in a place that was a court, so that there were 8 houses, and cars did not drive past our houses, so you could play on the street safely. And the kids, all the families had children, and we would play. And there was there were 2 Jewish families with a total of 4 kids. There was 1 Protestant family with 4 kids. There were 2 Catholic families. Well, it was actually different.
Oh, so you even went beyond the fact that everybody's under one umbrella, and you actually go into details.
And then there were 2 Catholic families that had 6 children all together. And we used to play a game called War. And
oh, what a nice game for kids.
A terrific game. It was a make-believe game on the street. And I don't remember quite how it worked, but I do remember that there was a summer when, right at the beginning of the summer, where somehow my brother and I, as the only 2 Jewish kids playing that day, were on one side of the battle, and the Protestant and Catholic kids were on the other side. And they suddenly started calling my brother, who was at that time about 3½, Jew bastard, Christ killer.
Oh my God.
And my brother hid behind me, and I started screaming because I was 3½ years older than him, so I was 6½, 7, saying, like, you have to apologize. And they refused. They kept repeating it. And so that summer, I went into the house and I wouldn't talk with them. And I refused to talk to them until they would apologize, and they got very stubborn. And they didn't. And so that entire summer, whenever I was home, my brother and I would sit on a front stoop it was a small stoop with a few steps, and we would watch the kids play on the street, but we wouldn't play with them because of what they had said. And
it was traumatic, I'm sure.
It was impactful, but how it ended was also impactful. Mm-hmm. The father of one of the Catholic families came to my father at the end of the summer, and he said, we have to talk. He said, this is not healthy for our children. Our children should be able to play with each other. And I really apologize, but my wife is a bigot. But we need our children not to be. And my father agreed, and I was told the next day that I was to play with the other kids and let it be behind me, as were his kids. And we just started to play together again the next day.
Great. So back to peace.
It took somebody with a lot of courage to face their own truth. Yes. And to build a bridge.
So that's what we learned from this story, but do we learn anything else? Do we learn that if we keep religion aside and everybody practices his own religion in peace without intruding to somebody else, wouldn't be living in a peaceful world?
I think that should be our vision. Mm-hmm. And I think we can find ways to make it a practical reality in different environments, and that is a step toward achieving it.
Mm-hmm. You think humanity or human beings in general like to be in different teams? I'm the red team, you're the yellow team, I'm the tall.
I think, yeah, I think some people, yes. Mm-hmm. I also think sometimes we create those environments and stimulate them. But if you look at global corporations, they spend a lot of energy and time helping their staff learn how to be teams and to work cooperatively together. And so I think you can use teamwork not only to compete, but also to learn how to cooperate and help others to be stronger.
Yes. Or we can also use the fact that we like teams and form one big team called humanity. We respect each other, we love each other, and we're working against evilness.
Now that's the golden rule, right?
That would be great, right? When did Tannenbaum founded?
Tannenbaum was founded in 1992. Rabbi Mark Tannenbaum had died, and his widow was pregnant with their only son. And she got a call from a leader who had also worked in interfaith issues in the United Kingdom. And he called and he said, you know, what are you doing about Mark's legacy? And her answer was, I'm giving birth to his son. And he said, that's not good enough. And he came over to the US and he gave her a small grant and he said, do something so that his legacy of social justice and human rights is not lost. And she founded Tannenbaum to make sure that the work he had begun and the vision that he had created didn't get lost. And I think Tannenbaum lives up to his vision, although we do our work very differently than he did.
Great. I was just talking about peace a few minutes ago, and you wrote this book, right?
I was involved in the writing of the book, yes.
Yes.
I did a lot of heavy editing there.
Peacemakers in Action.
Right. It's a book by Tannenbaum.
Yeah, the title is very attractive. And it says Profiles of Religion in Conflict Resolution.
Right.
So is it really about forming peace between different religions? And have you, why did you decide to produce that kind of book?
Okay, well, Tannenbaum does its work in two main ways. Mm-hmm. One is involved with international armed conflicts, and there we look for religious people, meaning men and women who are driven by religion, not only clergy or leaders of their traditions, but also those who simply because of religion are driven, and we work with them. The other way we work is in everyday life. So in that international arena, we developed the theory in the late 90s that, and others were beginning to think about this, that in addition to institutions, there had to be these men and women out there that because of religion were working for peace. So we developed 5 criteria, which include being religiously motivated, working in an armed conflict, at least partly at the grassroots, being relatively unknown at the time that we select you, and having put your life or your freedom at risk. And then we do a nominations process every couple of years to name a peacemaker, and we call them Peacemakers in Action. And
that's great.
We've named 28, 24 of whom are now living, and the others, they died of natural causes, actually. And this book does case studies of 16 of them and analyzes how they did their work, because the way people work for peace is different, and there are many different ways to do it, so that by analyzing their techniques, other people can learn and emulate them.
And tweak it a little bit.
Adapt it.
To adapt it for their ability and skills and culture.
That's correct.
Yeah, it's great. It's a wonderful model. Do you guys promote religion tolerance? And how, if you do?
All right, so I'm pausing because the answer is sort of, but not really. What we do is we promote understanding and respect and putting into practice behaviors of respect. Tolerance is something that forever for me is like holding up your nose and saying, I'm going to tolerate you and that's okay.
Yes. Just keep the distance. I tolerate you, but you're on this side, I'm on this side of the bridge, we don't talk to each other.
Exactly.
You should be thankful that I'm tolerating you.
Exactly. and for some people, that's a step, but it's not our goal. What we're promoting is treating other people who believe differently than you, or who are different than you, as valuable people with respect. And that's in all settings, whether it's in school or workplaces or in peacemaking. I mean, we think that these actors really need to be part of the solution for diplomats, that you can't only make peace at the diplomatic table, you also have to make it with the people at the grassroots who are respected by their friends and followers, who are going to be there to make sure it's implemented. And they're, you know, our peacemakers also work together beyond this book.
Sure. Let's take a little break and then we'll come back, talk more about Tannenbaum and Joyce Dubinsky. So we're back again with Joyce Dubinsky. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
All right. I wanted to talk to you after the break more about the book, The Peacemakers in Actions, and I wanted to ask you a question. I don't know if you have an answer to it. How many peacemakers out there?
Well, I don't think any of us know the answer to that. What we do know is that when you look for relatively unknown, religiously motivated peacemakers, there are many, and many of them can't be found because they're not interested in being named for an award. They're busy doing their work. Mm-hmm. And they are a resource. They're not the only answer to conflicts involving religion and those that don't involve religion, but they are a resource in their communities. And so it's really incumbent upon leaders and upon diplomats to look for these people and to find the people who have made religious peacemaking a personal vocation, because it is a vocation. It's not just something people dabble in. It's something that they pursue for their work.
Do you have an idea if you have more Jews than Muslims than Christians, or Christians more than Muslims? Or
Well, I think the answer is we go for nominations worldwide, and we seek nominations from a range of different places and from activists. So we have over 2,000 individuals and institutions on our list. And invariably, we get many more nominations of men than women, but that's not because there aren't women peacemakers. It's because women nominate men and men nominate men.
Okay.
We get many more Christians than other groups, and we find that in the Buddhist and Hindu and Eastern traditions, there's less inclination to nominate, and we're hypothesizing that has to do with the beliefs, not with the fact that people are there or not there. They are there, but because they believe in community. So we have a Buddhist peacemaker from Sri Lanka. But when she was named and selected and we called her, she said, I don't know if I can accept this award because the work I do with community. And we do it as a community. And I have to see if the community would agree to an individual being recognized.
So she's putting herself last, and it's great.
And that's part of her culture and her religious practice and her beliefs.
And she probably believed that she wants to do that, so she doesn't really need to be nominated for it, right?
Well, many of the peacemakers feel that way, although not all. I think different cultures are more individualistic, and some are more group-centric, and that's religious and cultural.
So, what's the importance of religious understanding?
Well, a couple of answers, maybe three. The first is, look at the news. You read the headlines any day, and you see how people are killing each other, really killing children, and killing civilians, killing each other in the name of religion, persecuting whole peoples so that they feel they can no longer live in their homelands. All of these different issues emerge, and a lot of that draws on religion. So when there's religious understanding, what you get to is understanding that being different is normal. And so you and I sit here, and we're both in New York City. Okay. We're both professionals. Yeah. We both have children. Mm-hmm. And if you put our hands together, the color of our skin is different. So the point is that we all have similarities and differences, and that is the second thing that I think religious, understanding is critical. And I think the third is that there are real practical ways we can conduct ourselves where people are treated with respect and feel that they are being treated with respect. And when we do that, it inures to all our benefit. It doesn't only stop outright war. It also leads to greater prosperity. I mean, there's data that shows that when you have more religious freedom and respect for religious differences in a country, it's more economically prosperous.
Well, I've noticed you mention, or you repeatedly mention the word respect.
Yes.
What's the definition of respect
For me?
from your understanding? It's a big word.
It's a very big word. I think we tackle it at Tannenbaum from the perspective of what does it look like if it's in practice. So we'll work with, peacemakers and say to diplomats, we think it's important for you to recognize religious peacemakers and respect what they can bring to the table.
So recognize is tolerance, tolerate, and then understand
and then
it.
bring it, yes.
And then understand it, and then respect it, which is probably the highest level.
I guess for me, yes. I mean, theoretically speaking, but you can also practice it in very simple ways so that you can, in a workplace, in a global workplace, create a room where people during the day can go to observe their religious beliefs and pray. But I would suggest you not call it a prayer room. I would suggest it be called a quiet room, because if you really want to welcome any people and any beliefs, you want to welcome the person who wants to meditate, the person who wants to reflect, the person who wishes to pray, and also perhaps the atheist or the agnostic who wants a quiet place to just be. And it should welcome each and every staff person as appropriate for that need.
So rather than having 10 different rooms in a workplace with 10 different religions and beliefs, you suggest having one big quiet place where everybody comes in and do their thing.
Yes, and you can have, ways of signing up to use it and particular rules around it.
It's a great idea. It's actually bonding everybody. People can, somebody would be praying, a Muslim guy can be praying, Christian guy would be sitting meditating, a Jewish person would be reading the Bible. It's a very interesting idea.
Well, it can be that, or it can be that they do it in
rotation
and how they choose to. And each company should do it in a way that works for the company as well. But what it does is it creates a space that says all people are treated equally and with respect.
And everybody can respect that space because in one way or another it relates to their belief.
Or their choice not to believe.
Yes. Great. It's a wonderful idea. What's the impact of religion intolerance or tolerance in the workplace?
Well, Tannenbaum did a national study in the U.S. of American workers, and we found that 1 in 3 American workers, that's 1/3, have either personally experienced or witnessed religious prejudice and bias. And we measured that against 9 different types of things, like whether they'd had a problem wearing religious garb or they'd been ridiculed. But beyond that, I think in our study, what it showed is that the majority of issues arise in larger companies of 1,000 and more, and those companies tend to be global. So what we're really talking about is an issue that permeates the global workplace. And the data shows that if you address religious bias, if you promote behaviors of respect and policies that require it, you have more satisfied workers, and workers who are therefore more productive, and your bottom line increases. So it's good for the company, and it's good for the employee.
Yes. Everything has an exception, every rule has an exception, and everything has different perspectives. We had some issues where sometimes people use religion to get away from doing their work. So instead of praying once a day, they want to pray 5, 6 times a day. If they want to go out for 5 minutes, they go out for 15 minutes. So what can we do to control this and yet respect religion without interfering with their belief?
Well, I think that there's an issue of balancing. People go to work in order to work.
Yes.
And people get hired to work in order to produce.
Yes.
At the workplace. So in the U.S. there's a law which I think works very well. There's a law that says you are required to accommodate someone's sincerely held religious belief, provided it doesn't unduly burden the company. Now, that's the concept. How it applies in any particular fact situation will be different.
It has to be tailored to each company.
Each situation. But the situation you described is someone, and you're postulating, someone who is not per se sincerely practicing their faith, but who's taking advantage
of the fact
that they can say they are sincerely practicing their faith, and who's taking extra time and not working optimally.
Yes.
So that may be an undue burden on the company, and therefore that person would not be entitled to that accommodation.
Okay, because I wanted to clarify the fact, if we have a system where everybody can benefit from, but there's always an exception to the rule, and there are people that want to use the system to their own benefit, but we want to be aware. So do you suggest that would be a board in each company that would decide that this is right, this is wrong, or how do we know the standards? How do we set the rules?
Well, at Tannenbaum we talk about training companies to have an accommodation mindset. That means an inclination to look for solutions so people can practice sincerely held beliefs.
So the answer is training.
That's one answer.
Okay.
The answer is also policies, and the answer is also setting limits when it is an undue burden. And human resources departments and companies very often can manage this, and sometimes it becomes a legal issue depending on what country you're in.
Sure.
You know, in the U.S., if you don't accommodate someone and they sue,
it's a problem.
But if you've tried in one way or another to accommodate them, or it would have unduly burdened you and you can prove it, then you're fine, and you're not going to lose that lawsuit.
Sure. I'm just saying that because I want to assure the companies that, you know, it's okay to give a chance to your employees to practice the religion, but, you know, and also you don't have to be worried about the fact that they can use the system or abuse the system, because you can always monitor. And
there are many different ways to create monitoring.
Sure. Has Tannenbaum attempted to reach out to the Middle East area?
Tannenbaum has done some work in the Middle East over the years, and we have peacemakers from the region who are doing work in the Middle East. And if you remember the Gaza war,
yes,
at that moment, and it was fortuitous, Tannenbaum was in Jerusalem with a number of our peacemakers working with the Van Leer Jerusalem Institute on peace building and how to help people build bridges. And it was a very tense time in that city.
yes.
And people, they thought no one would come because it had been scheduled, and the room was so full they had to move us to a second room that was larger because people overflowed and cared about that issue. That's one way that we had done the work, showing people from, you know, an evangelical pastor from Nigeria, a Muslim educator from the Galilee, a Presbyterian who had worked in South Sudan, a friar who had worked in Sarajevo during the Bosnian War. And they all came together with Tannenbaum to talk about the fact that there are these religious peacemakers and that this is something that can be achieved and that there are things that one can do. So we did that. I also worked in Syria in 2009. I went with our Syrian peacemaker, and she held the first ever women's interfaith seminar for 2 days. And it was a very interesting time. And our goal at the end of our training was to train about our peacemakers in action and then have the participants, and there were about 60 women participating, each adopt an action plan. And some were very small things and some were bigger ideas. And as we went around the room, one woman said that she had never met a Jewish person before she met me. And that now that she'd met a Jewish person, when she traveled, she would not only try to talk to Christians and learn what they believed, but she would also try to listen and learn from Jews what they believed.
So you just felt like you're a normal person that she can talk
She
to.
concluded at the end of 2 days
Like
that
we're all people, we're all normal.
we're all different.
Yeah.
Right. But our peacemakers have done work, and so recently with all of the troubles in the Middle East, our Syrian peacemaker did a training for activists and civil activists within Syria and some who are in the camps. And she convened 80 people over the course of 4 weeks. And we supported an intervention to help her, meaning that our peacemakers, which work as a network now, and sometimes go in small groups to try to help in armed conflicts, we sent our Bosnian peacemaker and our South African peacemaker to work with these individuals so that they could start thinking about how are we going to survive this and rebuild this country that is being devastated by war, and what are we going to do when our neighbor killed our child? And how are we going to live next door to our neighbor? And so they talked about and worked on techniques for post-conflict reconciliation and for reconciliation even during the fighting.
I know that Tannenbaum is working on a second book, and I would like to learn more about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, as I mentioned, we have named 28 peacemakers, and we believe knowing about them, understanding them as real people, and seeing how they do their work is important. So in addition to this first book, we will have a second edition, if you will, coming out probably in the beginning of next year, covering our newer peacemakers, almost all of them, but not all of them, and doing updates of all the peacemakers from our first book. And it's very interesting because as we track their work, we see that there are times when they can create peace in a moment, not only peace that means a lack of war, but peace that means cooperation and respect, mm-hmm. and then it can disintegrate. And so one of our peacemakers, who in the first book we talked about his remarkable work in South Sudan and how he worked with the Nuer and the Dinka. Today, South Sudan has become its own country, but they're fighting again. And he's being, he's involved trying to help in the ways that he can. Mm-hmm. So the peace is not something one just achieves, it's something we have to continually work on.
Is it too late to solicit for you peacemakers from Egypt?
It's never too late for the book, probably because of the deadline, but we have a nominations process coming up probably in the fall, and we solicit nominations for people who fit our 5 criteria from anyone who is willing to fill in the forms and give us the information, and then that person would be reviewed and by our advisory program advisory council and might be selected.
Mm-hmm. How can we facilitate introducing you to Egypt?
Tannenbaum's work. Well, you know, there are ways that we work off-site, not per se in a country, and we also travel all over the world and do go to different places. So we have an education program, and in it we train teachers how to build into academic studies at every level lessons that teach kids that being different is normal and interesting, and how to ask about it. Mm-hmm. So we think that that's a skill set for success in a global society. We've done long-distance training, if you will, for educators in Nigeria, Indonesia, and Afghanistan, where we worked with those, point people in those countries. We did a study of some of their needs and their issues. Mm-hmm. We created webinars for them. They were in English. And then we made ourselves available through a conference call to answer questions and help guide them.
So I would like to re-emphasize on the fact that I would like to bring Tannenbaum to Egypt. Okay. And to help in the Egyptian community and help educating people that we're different. It's okay. Mm-hmm. We accept it, we understand it, we respect it, mm-hmm. and then we live on.
And so there are a range of resources and ways that could start today. On our website, there are a lot of materials in all of the areas we work in, meaning in our daily life. It's education for teachers, it's materials for doctors and healthcare providers, it's materials for workplaces, so that Egyptian leaders could access those materials. Some of them are free, some of them are not, some of them are right here, including our medical manual for religio-cultural competence, how to treat people based on the decisions that they're making because of their religions that is often ignored by their physicians and their nurses. And it's a very key issue to making sure they get quality health care. So that's possible. Other ways that we've worked are online, when we've worked with Afghanistan and Indonesia and mm-hmm. Nigeria, and we've trained educators working through webinars and conference calls to help them understand the Tannenbaum pedagogy and ways that they can teach every subject and simultaneously teach skills of respect and difference so that children can be successful in our global society and our global economy. And workplaces, we often are brought in by companies all over the world. I believe, for instance, that we're going to be going to China in a few months to do some trainings there and a panel there. And so we are available to
So you're available for partnership in different countries?
Of course,
Great.
Of course.
Well, after using all your resources and generously offering it for Egypt, how Tannenbaum?
Well, there are a lot of ways that people can help Tannenbaum. One is by paying attention to what we do, sharing the information among others. As a nonprofit, we always need friends and supporters, but that's true of charities in Egypt as well. Yes. But just paying attention, we have a lot of social media that we provide, and getting the word out and making this a cause that everyone needs to pay attention to, that's something that every person can do today.
What's your final word and advice to the Egyptian people in the current circumstances?
I would say keep your vision and keep a vision of respect for all people.
Respect again.
Yes.
Thank you very much for being in our show today. It was a delight to have you, and we'll like to see you in the future again.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Welcome back to American Pulse. Today In our today's show, I'm privileged and honored to have Dr. Jeff Moskowitz as my guest. Welcome to the show, Dr. Moskowitz.
Pleasure to be here.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for coming. Actually, Dr. Moskowitz is a very interesting person. He's a medical doctor, but he's been practicing medicine here for so many years in New York, and he knows a lot about Egypt, and he knows a lot about the Middle East, and he's very concerned about what's going on in the world. I've known Dr. Moskowitz on a very close level, and I've noticed that he has so much values and human ethics that I haven't found in dealing with a lot of people, and I want him to talk to us about how he grew up and how this all came together. So, can you give us an idea about your background?
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Mike, and to join you on the program.
I appreciate it.
My background is I was born in New Jersey from parents who were second-generation immigrants, so I had an appreciation of what it's like to bridge different cultures. When I was growing up, I was in a religiously mixed town. I was raised in the Jewish tradition, but received a very good education in terms of current events and events happening in other places of the world. And it became clear to me after growing up in New Jersey and then attending Yale University, where I had an opportunity to meet students from many different places, the amount of diversity in the world, and also how, no matter where people are from, their desires are very similar. Usually to find happiness between themselves and their partner, to raise their children, to have food, and to enjoy their lives, independent of whatever religion, culture, or government that they have.
Yes. Our main topic in today's show was about religion tolerance and how can we be different and how can we still live together. So did you encounter or have you experienced any situation where you had felt that it was very important for people to understand and respect each other's point of views?
Yes. When I was in college, I was fortunate to take several courses in the history of different religions and different cultures. And I remember one of the fellow students came with me back to my house in New Jersey. We made a deal that I would take him to the synagogue on a Saturday. We'd go to his church on a Sunday. That was actually the first time I'd been in the church, but not the last. And we talked about how the different cultures provided guidance in terms of values and were able to coexist in terms of, you know, believing different things about God, but practicing similar thoughts and habits with various people.
Do you think religious stubbornness has caused any damage in the world when people are very stubborn about their beliefs and not respecting others?
I think the cause of most wars that I know about is always religious intolerance. There's a saying that I like to repeat that says, you know, my God is more peaceful than your God. And if you don't believe me, I'll kill you, which shows the main problem with religious intolerance. And my sense is that, you know, God put us all here. We're all his children, and I believe we should learn to get along. But there are any number of people who do practice religious intolerance who say it's either my way or you don't deserve to live. And I don't really understand that, but that is, yes, there are many wars that have happened and events still happening today because of religious intolerance.
Egypt, there's many times you talk to me about a lot of things about Egypt, and I'm actually wondering how come it's, you know, you've lived here most of your life or all your life, and you shouldn't be caring about what happens outside the U.S. borders. How come you know so much about the Middle East and Egypt and other countries?
Personal curiosity, part of my training in college, part of my travels. I have a very long previous relationship with a French woman who was a journalist who spent much time in the Middle East, who added to that value. But it's also, if you're talking about Egyptian culture goes back many, many thousands of years. So part of my reading in history was also reading about Egyptian culture. Even in healthcare, which I'm trained in, the Egyptian system was very far advanced thousands of years ago. And there was a great understanding of disease processes, and wellness, so that always interested me. And I think the Semitic peoples, of which I'm descended from, all have many elements in common. So part of my interest in education was learning about these common elements and thought processes.
Have you heard about the last two Egyptian revolutions?
Yes.
Okay, what do you know about them?
I know that during the quote-unquote Arab Spring, there was a movement to bring more, for lack of a better word, democratic processes to the Middle East, which has been dominated more by various strongmen, dictators, people of that type. So in Egypt, there was, from my understanding, a movement really generated by the people out of dissatisfaction for a long-serving head of state who was, from what I read, relatively unresponsive to the needs of the people. So the people came together and said, let's develop something along the lines of where the younger people have a say and various religions and cultures can all participate. And to me, from what I read, that's how it started. And then that, because the only relatively organized force in Egypt under the previous administration was the Muslim Brotherhood, they were able to benefit from what I read was basically a popular revolution. And that led to a government which I think, from what I read, since you're asking my opinion,
Yes.
was more geared towards their own aims than the aims of the people, and more involved with religious intolerance than tolerance. And so that government was forcibly replaced by the army, which is a long-standing respected force in Egypt. And that second revolution is now in process. And I know the General Al-Sisi was just elected the new president.
Yes. So Dr. Moskowitz, I know you on a very personal level, and I know that you've worked with different people from different religions and different backgrounds. I've seen you working with Muslims, Christians, and different Jews, and I noticed that you never discriminate, and you like to have a very close relationship with everybody, regardless to their beliefs or backgrounds. Is this something that you just learned over the years, or there's something happened that you wanted to put your foot down and you said, you know what, I'm just going to treat everybody equally, or you just value humanity? That's,
I guess, all the above. Basically, when I was studying history, it was clear how much intolerance caused problems, and I would see intolerance in my own family, prejudices built up over years. But I was particularly affected by my first father-in-law, who was a survivor of the concentration camps, and of other people like that I'd met in Toronto, where I was living. And
I wonder if you elaborate on the concentration camps, because some of my viewers,
they were,
if that's
sure.
not a
Well,
problem.
my first in-laws were born in Poland, and during the World War II, when Poland was invaded by the Germans, they were forcibly taken from their homes and sent to what was called concentration camps, where the majority of people there were killed simply because of their religion. And they were able to escape and make their way to Canada. And I was watching them and other people of similar background. I was impressed by how some were very open-minded, saying, look what happened to us, we have to get rid of prejudice. But the majority became prejudiced themselves. That rather than learning from the experience, in my opinion, to be more open-minded, they were similarly prejudiced against people who were not from their background. So that was a big part of my evolution, saying we're all people and we should respect each other.
Yeah.
And as I got older, and also through my various practices, you get to see that people are the same. They're same on, they may look different on the outside, but we're all the same on the inside. So that led to me believing that as much as I respect religion, that people often use religion as a way to separate and to bring together. And so that's how I feel, very open towards everybody, as long as, you know, they feel the same way. And I find that if you give, and you give a sense of openness, that's often returned from other people.
Sure. What's your advice to the Egyptian people right now after these revolutions? We have a president, and I think, you know, we should work in order to get to where we want to. And what's your advice to the Egyptian population?
My advice would be to focus more on education, on economics, on providing a good family sustenance for the majority of the population, and less on religion or the past. To look forward to the future, to the beauty of the Egyptian tradition, and to focus on improving the education, the economy, and opportunities.
But I'm afraid people would think that you don't want them to teach their kids the religion, so I would like you to specify and clarify this point. You don't want them to focus on religion, but rather teach them religion, but focus more on other things.
Absolutely. Religion is an important part of developing a moral pulse, but it's not an end in itself. So my sense then is, whether you're Coptic or Muslim or whatever you are in Egypt, work together towards common goals while respecting your individual religion and where you come from.
So you think if Copts and Muslims work hand to hand, they'll bring Egypt to where it should be?
Absolutely.
Right. Thank you for coming to our show today, Dr. Moskowitz.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you. Thank you very much.